The next setup function would be quality attributes. Now these quality attributes can be created specific to one item or routing, or as a general attribute that may apply to multiple items and routings. Quality attributes are linked to items and routings in the maintain quality procedures, which will be the next setup function that we discuss. 4 types of attributes are available: numeric, date, list, and text. The example I have here is a numeric. A specific material attribute would typically use a numeric type so that lower and upper tolerances can be defined around a default value. You'll see I can also define a value precision by attribute, so each attribute can have different decimal places. I've also defined a default value of 0.531 here. I've defined a lower tolerance of 0.490 and an upper tolerance of 0.540. So when I perform my tests, the outcome must be between the upper and the lower tolerance. I can also define if some of the samples can fail without failing the overall test that I'm performing. So that's what I define in the overall fail tolerance. Down in the lower left you'll see lot characteristic. If lot characteristic is checked, one test will be created per lot of material, and the test results will also update the lot characteristic file in inventory management. Notes can be entered for each attribute, which will be pulled forward into the individual tests as they're created. If test results should be based on specific list values, in the example I have here, yes or no, then typically you would use a list type of attribute. And if I click on the list values, you'll see in the screen that I can list as many values as I want to and then check which of those values would pass the test. One of those will be defined as the default, which will appear not only in the attribute screen here, but also in the test result entry screen. Again, if this is a lot characteristic, then this would update the lot information in inventory management. A text type attribute could be used to define specific results that would signify a passing entry. The example displayed is for PO receiving personnel to verify that a material tag is accompanying the material coming into the plant and telling them to record the heat number and the wire size as part of the test. The default value of yes here signifies that the tag is with the materials. Notes can also be entered here that would pull through to the test as it's created. A date type attribute can be used to define tests that revolve around a specific date, and in this case I can define upper and lower tolerance in days so that the test will verify if the event falls within the date range allowed. Now that our attributes have been defined, we're going to define quality procedures which link those various attributes up with items or routings to be tested. The sample size for this can either be percentage or quantity. So if I say percentage, then the sample size would be a percentage. The example here is for a raw material item, so on PO receiving then, do I want to have a sample size that's fixed based on quantity, or do I want a percent of everything that came in? I then define whether this is active. Do I allow retests? So if during the testing process I have a failure, do I want to allow a retest to correct the entry? Also, do I want to test per lot of material? So I can check that. Okay, on the lower left then you'll see I've entered my attributes, and because this is a material item, I'm going to put my items in here that would also be appropriate for this procedure. So this same procedure could be appropriate for multiple items. I can list those down. Each one is by warehouse. Check active next to which of those items I want to be part of this. And on the right side you'll see that I check based on inventory transactions out here whether this test applies to those or not. So if I scroll down, you'll see that it contains pretty much all the inventory related and manufacturing related transactions. So I've checked PO receipt from vendor, and I've also checked the IM purchase here. I also check if I want auto generate to take place, which means when I go in and do a PO receipt, do I want it to automatically create the test for me, or do I want to go in and manually create a test based on that receipt? If auto generate is checked, then at PO receiving time the system will automatically create the test. Then I would go out, find the test, and enter the results in there. Quality procedures that are defined for routings are created in much the same way. I would list on the left side all the attributes that would apply to the test. Then I would come over to the Routings tab and enter in the routing, the version, and the step, and whether it's active or not. Now this procedure could apply to multiple routings, versions, and steps out there, so you can enter them all in the same screen here. Now one difference here is that on my frequency type, this can be a percentage and a quantity. So in this instance, I've defined every 4,000 parts that are produced, I want a sample size of 1, as I've defined up above. So that will create a test then based on the quantity that I'm actually producing. There are two ways to create tests in the module. One is if the quality procedure is defined to auto-generate, then the test will automatically be created as the transactions are created in MAS 500. The second method is to manually come in and create a quality test. Now if I drop down on the source code, you'll see that all the potential inventory transactions and manufacturing transactions are there. So I've picked receipt from vendor. Then I would look up or enter in the transaction ID that I want to enter the test for. And it, in this case, defaulted the item, the warehouse, and the test size. So all I do is click proceed, and a test is created. Okay, from that point, the best way to review this and actually enter the data is to come into the BIE view that's been created. And if I refresh, then my new test will appear. Okay, here's the new test that I just created. And if I highlight that, below I can see the attributes that I will be testing for. After I've actually entered the transactions in, then I can see test results and final stats out there. So whichever test is highlighted, if I come down to Manage and click Quality Results, that will take me right to the test entry screen where I can enter the results. Now in the quality results entry screen, the first thing I do is enter my employee ID, which is a required field. The status will be new for any test out there. Once I've begun entering data and I save it, it's then in testing until I finalize the test. But these are the different phases that it'll go through. If the test results are favorable, then it'll pass. If they're unfavorable, it will fail. I can also create a retest then so that the status will be in retest. Okay. At this point, this is a new test. And you'll see that I have defined in the system that I want one sample, and my test size here is 10,000. So down on the results value, I can just click and it'll put in the default values for me, and you'll see that each one of those passed because that is the default. So if any of these were outside of the tolerances entered, the passed box would not be checked and it would fail. So based on the tolerance that I've defined out there as well, then based on each sample, will the overall test pass or fail based on that. Now say I wanted to add another sample to this. All I do is click Add Sample, and then I can go to my second sample out here and again enter these in. Okay, and you'll see if I put 0.50, I think it's 0.490, so we'll put something below that. And when I tab off that, this did not pass, so this would cause a fail out there. Okay, so it keeps doing that based on the tolerances that I've set up for that. So once I have all of my entries in, and you can see up here it adjusted the number of samples because I added a sample out there, then I click Finalize Test. Okay. And you'll see the status is now in testing. Okay, so this brings up and tells me that each one of my steps or my attributes has passed. So I can put additional notes in here. And save this. And that tells me my status is passed, and I can't enter any more transactions. The grid is grayed out. Now if I wanted to see what my entries were, I can click on what is now the Final Stats button and review what I entered in on the system. Okay, so that test is completed. Now that my test results have been entered in, I can come back into my Explorer view for the quality tests. I've highlighted the tests that we entered the results for. You'll see that it now says that it's passed. So now if I click on the Test Results button, you'll see down at the bottom here's the results for both of the samples that I put in. So sample 1 is highlighted here with the results, and sample 2 has its results. So as many different samples as you've entered in, you would see them below. And then the Final Stats is where I could see the notes that I put in, whether the entire test passed and so forth. And up at the top of the view I can scroll across and see any of the additional information, including the user fields that are out there. If an error was made in the original quality results entry, you can come back into the results entry, click Create Retests. It opens it up again, and the status is now in retest, so I can enter my stats in here for both of the samples that were out there. Now let's go ahead and make one of these fail here. So you'll see that it actually fails out there. If I now come into Finalize Test, my status is now failed. Okay, and I can put in here why it failed. Okay, another thing I can do is on my custom fields is enter in what to do with the failed materials. So let me come back out of here before we actually do that. We know that it failed because of the checkbox. So this is one where my disposition can come into play. If I wanted to return this material to the supplier, then I can check that. Then let's go out and we will finalize our tests. And save that. So now you'll see the status has failed. If I go back into Final Stats, I can see what happened out there and what failed and what percent failed.